Hey y'all, my name's Megan. I'm a homeschool mom of 2 and welcome to Bold School. Yeah, it's looking pretty good, looking pretty cute. So I'm snowed in. I've been snowed in. I don't know when I won't be snowed in, and I think I might be going a little bit crazy. So you guys are definitely my saving grace today, because I do feel as if I had a reason to, put on a brassiere, freshen up the old hair and makeup, and do a little something today. But I'm going to tell you, that doesn't mean that I'm not in my old sweatpants and Crocs below the camera. Okay, I bet you didn't want to really know how the sausage was made, but there it is, folks. There's no taking it back now. Today's video is a collaboration with the always lovely Valerie from our Homeschool Castle. Valerie is a homeschool mama to a blended family of 5. She's busy, you guys. And over on her channel, you're just going to find curriculum reviews, ASL resources, art therapy resources, preschool ideas, unschooling ideas, all the things. So make sure that you go check her out. Honestly, you guys, the best part of doing these collaborations with other secular homeschool creators is the friendships that I have been able to form. And I am so lucky to call Valerie my friend. And as a matter of fact, Valerie and I have started doing Instagram lives every first and third Monday of the month. And we just had our first one ever this past Monday, and it was an absolute blast, and I cannot wait to do it again. If you missed that, you can go and check it out. It is on repeated loop on Valerie's Instagram. I will link that down below. If you want to catch the next one, just make sure that you follow me on Instagram, and I'll make sure to let you know when it's going to happen. As part of this collaboration, Valerie, myself, and a whole bunch of secular homeschool creators are going to be sharing with you guys the history resources and curriculum that we use in our homeschool. So make sure that you check out the playlist down below. And I just really hope that you find some good stuff. In our homeschool, we use a variety of resources at any given time, but we do have a certain set of books that I really consider to be our spines. And that's actually what I plan on sharing with you guys today. Now, my oldest daughter is 7.5, and she uses a history curriculum that I like to refer to as a linear history study that we've been doing that covers the fall of Rome to the emergence of the Renaissance. But that's not really what I'm here to talk about today. Instead, I want to share with you guys the spines that we use for studying U.S. history in our homeschool. Now, the 3 books that I'm going to be sharing with y'all today, we usually use, let's say if we're approaching a national holiday or an anniversary of a significant historical event, we pull these out and use them as reference to kind of deepen our conversations around each topic. Now, if you want a full video of how and why I chose these specific books, I'm going to put a card in the video up above, and I will link that video down below, letting you know exactly the process that I go through to select a historical text, because I don't like anything that's just whitewashy or has some weird agenda or something along those lines. I really try to make sure that I am providing the best history I can for my kiddos. Okay, also I want to let you guys know that all of the books that I'm going to be sharing with you today are secular resources. So if you're a secular homeschooler and that's really important to you, these resources are across the board, just flat out secular. They're written in an academic voice, and they don't contain any religiously or faith-based biases. Biases? I think that's the right word. Let's get into these books. Okay, the first book that I'm going to share with you guys is Howard Zinn's A Young People's History of the United States. You may be familiar with Howard Zinn's People's History of the U.S., which is a really fairly popular book, and this is just a young person's edition. Now, what makes Howard Zinn's histories a lot different than things you may have seen before, and definitely different from textbooks that you would experience in the classroom, is that his history of the United States is told from the perspective of generally marginalized groups, which are oddly just normal Americans. So for example, if we are going to discuss Christopher Columbus, which is more or less where this narrative begins, we are not going to be told that story through the eyes of Christopher Columbus or European explorers, but actually from the reaction of indigenous peoples to the arrival of Europeans. And that type of narrative switch, or that point of view switch, is going to continue all the way up to the Iraq War. So you're going to be seeing women's perspectives, enslaved people's perspectives, indigenous, immigrants, workers' rights. So if you're looking for a history that's really just going to, let's talk about the Civil War specifically, go over every detail of the Gettysburg Battle, or tell you about the Gatling gun, right? Or things along those lines, this really is not the book for you. But you know what? Those resources are so readily available, right, that this is actually a really refreshing take on United States history. I'll show you the inside and tell you how I feel about the reading style. So there are lots of really good images in this book. It is black and white, so it's not just like super flashy, but something that I think it would make a good read aloud is that it is written in brief. So it's not as if each section or each chapter is exceptionally long, or that it's an extensive coverage of any particular subject. So I think it would make for a really good read aloud, even like if Morning Basket works for your family, which it does not for mine, but if it works for you, hey, power to you. This would be an excellent book to add into the rotation. Something else about this, because it is switching perspectives from the narrative that we generally are told, it makes for a really great lesson on historical agency, right? Because if we are looking, for example, at enslaved people through the narrative of Howard Zinn's Young People, they are really given agency. What are the enslaved population doing to get their own rights, right? To be active in their own story. Generally speaking, the story of the Civil War is presented as the North and the South. We fought and then we bequeathed freedom to enslaved peoples, which is not an accurate depiction. And it really goes into detail about, again, what that enslaved population was doing to really control the narratives of their own lives. And I think that's really, really important. Okay, the next book that I'm going to share with you guys that we use as a U.S. history spine in our homeschool is An Indigenous People's History of the United States for Young People by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. So again, you are looking at a book that was really written for adults, taken to being something that can be a read aloud for young kiddos, and even something you could assign as independent study for middle schoolers or high schoolers. And y'all, talk about a book that is just going to rock your world and make you really question the perspective and narrative of U.S. history. Because, like the title suggests, it is coming from an Indigenous person's perspective. And that is something that is very humbling if it was never a narrative that was presented to you in a classroom or something that just was part of your, historical narrative of the United States. Because as you can imagine, from an Indigenous person's perspective, the history of the United States is not just some pleasant, patriotic heart song that fills them with joy, right? And something that I think this book does a really good job of is also presenting Indigenous persons as an existing population who, yes, had agency over their own narrative and are not something that we're studying like, oh, people that used to exist, right? We're really taking their history and pulling it into the present. And like Zen's, I would say that everything is presented in a pretty rapid fashion. Nothing is just like, extensively covered. These are really meant to be, in my opinion, conversation starters, really challenging your perspective, shaking up the way you look at U.S. history. We used this one at Thanksgiving, and I will link that video down below and put a card up above as to how we used it. And it was just really fascinating, really, really eye-opening. And I'm so glad to see that more of these types of texts are becoming so readily available. So I'm going to share with you one more spine and then just a little handful of resources of things that I also like to use. So this is called A Different Mirror for Young People, A History of Multicultural America, and this is from Ronald Takaki. Now, again, this is an adult book that is then adapted for younger readers. So just like Zen and just like Ortiz, when we're looking at this book, we are presented with different points of view for the U.S. history narrative than we usually get. But I like this one as well because it is presenting, yes, Indigenous persons, yes, enslaved peoples, Black Americans, women, but we're also going into all of the multicultural groups that help make up the culture of the United States, specifically looking at Mexican Americans, right? Japanese immigrants, kind of bringing that into a Japanese American culture, right? All the blending of these different cultures and the reactions that they experienced and how they were, again, being given agency over their own story and their own narrative. This is a really good one. Same thing, similar kind of structure that you could really use this, once again, as a read aloud. When I hold these up, I hope you guys are seeing that what I mean by that is this is not just textbook level dense, right? So if you're used to using a narrative style history as a read aloud, something like this is going to fold in really well to that. Okay, those are like the three spines of U.S. history that we use. Now I just want to show you just kind of a collection of things that I'll pull out as well. All right, the first little gem that I want to share with you guys, these are the History Smasher books, and these are from Kate Messner. We first used this at Thanksgiving, and it just blew my mind that I also have several others ordered, but the snow is keeping them delayed. Oh, but I did order one that was about women gaining the right to vote in the United States, and that is for Women's History Month coming up in March. But I can't wait to get my hands on it. This book was such a smashing success with my family that we were actually reading it to like our extended family when we met them for Thanksgiving this past year, because I guess we're the weird homeschool family. Oh well. What I really like about this text is that it presents the stories in a narrative format, but it also gives the kiddos lots of primary source documentation. And it also presents the narrative in a variety of ways. There are, like I said, primary source documentation, got some images in there as well. There is also like little comic book style presentation, narrative presentation as well. So with one book, here's a little bit more of the comic strip style. With one book, you are really exposing your kiddos to a variety of writing styles and how to pull information from that. I love these because it is also presenting nonfiction in a way that isn't just stale, okay, or boring. And these stories also brings out just kind of some like humorous, weird elements of history that we don't always discuss, but is the thing that really hooks kids. We use this as a read aloud, but I also know several people who've used this as independent study for middle schoolers or even high schoolers. History Smashers, make sure you check them out. They're really, really cool. The last little series that I want to share with you guys that we use as a history resource in our homeschool are the what is or who was books, usually sometimes referenced as like the big head books, right? We used Who Was Martin Luther King Jr. last month, and this month we're using What is the Civil Rights Movement. I find these books to be really well researched. The bias, if any, was presented is fairly innocuous and easy to explain or be like, and it's not enough to just like throw the baby out with the bathwater. So for example, when we read Who Was Martin Luther King Jr., something that was a little bit bizarre was that the author was drawing comparison to JFK being Catholic, therefore being able to understand the type of discrimination that Black Americans faced in the 1950s and 1960s. That's not to say that Catholics have not faced prejudice in United States history. They have, of course. But something that I did think was bizarre is kind of equating those two. And that was pretty easy to say, let's think about this for a minute. And we have really, really enjoyed what was or what is the Civil Rights Movement. When you get these books, you are going to get so much more than just the story of the Civil Rights Movement. They also include all of these little like vignettes about other culturally important things that add context to the story. So for example, like this one has a little section about the role that television started to play in activism and how it became a more and more staple of U.S. households that it wasn't before, and how that helped to alter political opinion. In the one we read about Martin Luther King Jr., you also got a snippet into Rosa Parks. You got a snippet into what the Confederacy was. This one has already introduced what the Ku Klux Klan is. So all of these things that are actually pretty deep subjects that the authors really present in a way that I feel like is totally appropriate even for younger readers. And what I really like about this one is all of the images that are included in the back. So you get the illustrations, but you're also getting actual images as well. Okay, you guys, I really hope that you liked this video and that you got something from it. I know that I didn't talk about our linear history program that we use today, and that's because when I sat down to make this video, I actually maybe sort of, yes, 100%, had a existential crisis about the program that we're using, and we've decided to change everything. Might be because I'm also snowed in, I don't know. So next week's video, I am going to explain to you guys how we are changing our linear history study program, what we'll be using, and why we made a switch. So check us out next week to see that video. Listen, is it perfect? No, baby. And it was never gonna be. But is it done? Yeah. For today, it is. So until next time, bye.